Welcome to Finding the Front, brought to you by the proudly West Australian company, Euroz Hartleys. This is a podcast series where we take time out to get to know the story behind the people who front some of Western Australia's leading companies. We look back at some of the moments in their life and career that shaped the journey to being the leader they are today, and provide you with some real insights into the way they think and approach things, both in business and in life. So get the volume adjusted in your car or your headphones sorted and settle in for a great story. Here is your Finding the Front host, Tim Banfield.
Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Euroz Hartleys Finding the Front. Keep in mind, if you want to learn more about Euroz Hartleys, please don't hesitate to visit our website at www.eurozhartleys.com. This episode, we have an absolutely stellar opportunity to chat with Mr Bill Beament, the Managing Director of ASX-listed base metal developer and specialist underground mining service provider, Develop, stock code DVP. Bill, who is well known to many, is the former Managing Director and Executive Chair of Northern Star, having been with the company for some 14 years, overseeing a massive expansion from junior to a global-scale Australian gold producer with world-class projects in highly prospective regions of Australia and America. This podcast has it all, the highs and the lows, over 2 full parts, A and B. From Bill's upbringing in country WA to his days on the tools, learning the art of underground mining, to joining Northern Star, the phenomenal growth path, including the acquisitions, how the purchase of half of the Kalgoorlie Super Pit played out, the merger with Saracen Minerals, and what he is up to now, his views on Develop and his pathway forward. This is a cracker, without a doubt. So in the interest of time, let's get started. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to the Euroz Hartleys Finding the Front podcast, Mr Bill Beament. Billy, great to have you in the show. Such a privilege to have you and to be able to look back at your journey, which has been phenomenal, to say the least. I've done a bit of reading and I've read so many articles, and it's amazing when you do a Google search on Bill Beament, what comes up. It just goes forever. And be able to have you in here and be able to sort of hear it firsthand is a real treat for not only us, but also all our listeners. And so thanks very much for your time.
Oh, no, pleasure, Banners, and hopefully the Google searches are all positive.
Well, they were, mate, they were. So let's just start, if we can, back in Esperance. And I know you grew up down there, and it's a great way to start because it really is quite a strong part of your upbringing. Just give us a bit of an insight into growing up down in Esperance, which is literally a long way away from Perth.
Yeah, look, it's I sort of born and bred there, and I was the only one out of my family. So my sisters were born in Balranald in New South Wales, and that's where the folks originated from and come over in the 70s, and picked up their car and a few possessions and headed west to make a living. And we sort of lobbed in the community of Conningup. So yeah, definitely from Esperance, but I probably call Conningup home, to be honest. But was born out there and resided out in the country. So we were literally living on a farm about 30 k's out of town. And Dad had was a mechanic out in the bush, servicing tractors and headers, and so we were sort of living in the community. Dad was working in there at the beef machine.
Right.
So I think my kids are sick of me driving out of the Duke, which hopefully we touch on. That's just out near Condi. It's a fantastic beach spot, but every time we drive past the beef machine, I get a photo out the front, or I have a big smile going past it. Fond memories of growing up in that community and still, really close to that community. We've got a huge memorial to my dad on Anzac Day coming up.
Right.
Out at the Conningup Football Oval, so looking forward to that. But so spent first 10 years out there as a kid and terrorising the farm and, throwing boomerangs, chasing cows, or they were chasing me, going to the school bus. Yeah, it was fond memories growing out there, and Dad kicked off his business called Conningup Machinery Wreckers, which he started when I was about 5, so sort of got pretty good exposure to, I guess, a work ethic back then as well, with seeing how my dad operated in long hours and I guess his skill set and what he did with that business.
So you grew up, was it on a property out in Conningup?
Oh, look, we were in between Conningup and Esperance, and we were very fortunate. We had nothing. And, if it wasn't for your social security, I don't know how we would have got fed every day.
Right.
So they were pretty tough times, and I reflect on that a lot, and probably gives me a fair bit of grounding on how I am now as an individual. But we're just very fortunate. We had a family called the Johnsons that are big farmers halfway between, and gave peppercorn rent for us to live in an old asbestos house. It was 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and there was 3 of us kids and the folks. So we lived there for 8 years. I can't remember the first 2 because I lived in the beef machine, but can't remember those 2. But I do remember changing and getting thrown in the cot in my parents' bedroom. But yeah, they were very kind to us for those 8 years while we lived there, and I'll never forget that generosity and yeah, because we couldn't afford to live anyway.
So we'll get to your dad in a moment, but just tell us a little bit about growing up in Conningup, but also Esperance per se. You went to primary school there?
Yeah, I went to, I was sort of just in that junction point, probably another 10 Ks to the east, and I would have gotten a Conningup primary, but because I was in the catchment, we went to Castletown Primary. So yeah, so I did all my schooling there, and which was great. Probably hurt the old boy because I ended up playing for Newtown Football Club, not Conningup. But I did,
Right.
I did play 2 divisions until they worked it out and said you can't play 2 divisions. But yeah, so look, grew up and went to Castletown Primary for my whole schooling, and that was a good school. And I think the principal there is only just retired.
Is that right?
Mrs. Brewer. She's like, I think she was 83 or 84 when she retired a year or so ago, but she was the principal when I was there. And she's
Wow.
been there she's the longest serving principal in primary school history of WA. Yeah, growing up in Conningup, because Dad was working out there and had the business out there from the time I can remember. I spent the vast, outside of school, really out in the bush, out in that community, weekends out, with the old man and going around farms, and we did a lot of pop-ins.
Yep.
I'm a pop-in type person. My partner doesn't, not quite the same, but when you're country, you pop in, and and when you got your old man, the pop-in means a 6-pack of beer and catch up with mates. But all those guys that were the old man's best mates and farmers out there, all their sons were same age as me, so it was like it was a great time. I've really fondly loved those years of out in that community and knocking around with all those guys and girls, and just being a kid out in the bushes. It's a fantastic environment to learn from and grow up in and be around.
Oh, absolutely. So your dad was a mechanic, you mentioned that, and he went on to start his own business, and I sort of gather that he really was a big influence on you to start with in terms of delivering a work ethic but also showing the power of hard work. Could you just give us a bit of an insight into that business?
It was basically a wrecking yard. So
Oh, right.
he'd buy, second-hand tractors and harvesters and pull them to bits and clean up the parts and sell them to farmers all over Australia and a little bit offshore in the end as well. So very well-known business, very successful business. Yeah, look, Dad left school when he was 12. He could barely read or write and just went out and, didn't have the luxury of going to school like it was, they were on a farm out east of Balranald, and that was the thing you did back in that generation. He had 2 other brothers and they just worked, and then eventually, did a mechanic apprenticeship and worked in a dealership over there and servicing, in a service station as a mechanic, and come across and, just like had a passion for farm machinery. That's fair to say. I think there's an element. I think Dad would have loved to have been a farmer, but we just didn't have the money to buy the farms. Yep. And, that's the thing. Definitely when I went back east and saw the farming community back in Balranald and Swan Hill and that areas, and, it's intergenerational wealth and intergenerational farming, we didn't have that.
Yes.
So that was unfortunate. I think that Dad would have made an unbelievable farmer. And if you follow what's happening in the state of Western Australia, the richest and biggest farmers are actually out at Conningup. It's an amazing business area from the farming community, and they never have a bad harvest. They're always smiling when I see them, so that's unusual for farmers. I think they just had a record season just gone by, so there's a lot of new Toyotas. Actually, no, you can't even get a Toyota at the moment. There's a lot of happy farmers running around the community.
One hell of a year last year, wasn't it?
Oh, amazing prices and yields. Yeah, so look, Dad created that business out there and, built the shed. He hand-built his own shed workshop, which is, I was only 4 or 5, so, I threw a few, I can claim I threw a few spanners, but maybe I was just running around kicking a football. But yeah, that was, it's exciting time and a great community. And they backed my dad as well, the community. That's the other thing is, I think when we moved into the business into Conningup, there was only 3 houses in the town. There's a number of houses now. I think there's probably 150 or 200 houses there now. But yeah, there was only 3 when we moved in there. And it's one of the best pubs in the WA too. It's my favourite pub, the Condi Tav.
Right.
Mr Forrest was just there the other day trying to sell his FFI stuff. But fantastic pub and well patronised.
So with growing up in that community, sport clearly played a pretty big role. You enjoyed your footy, cricket growing up, or was it just football?
Oh, definitely footy. It's back in Esperance, I got right into tennis, and that was my main sport. But tennis was on the same time as cricket, so you couldn't do both. Hence why I played a lot of indoor cricket and only gave it up a couple of years ago. But footy was huge, and being in a small community, Connie Up had its own team back then, and my dad was a huge advocate of that. He was a major sponsor for a long time, and built stuff there, and was a real stalwart of the club financially and patronise-wise, and I think he might have called the siren once or twice as well, maybe a little bit earlier for a point in front, but that wouldn't be like the old boy. But no, footy was huge there, and still is, and it was something that brought the whole community together, and everyone's their sons played it all, and everyone was playing a league that probably should have been in Resi because we didn't have the numbers.
Yep.
Like I say, I played the under-12s there when I was playing sort of 12 reserves for Newtown, so just to make up the numbers, and hopefully I didn't make up the numbers, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
so
sure. Yeah.
It was one of those we had some old man Feegert, he was still playing Resis at the age of 50-something, so it was that type of comp from Conning Up. So we didn't really win many games, but we definitely were probably the most vibrant club out of the lot.
Well, sounds like a great time.
Yeah, it was. It was good, terrorising the community around there, and there's a lot of fun nights there. I saw my dad and his friends, and all myself and all our young kids, and as you grow up as well, you still go back there, and looking forward to going back on Anzac Day for the Anzac Day clash.
And tell me a little bit about your mum. What was she up to?
Yeah, look, my mum was, she come from a very good family back at home, like
Yes.
a very wealthy farming family, but look, back in those generations, the daughters got nothing, if you know what I mean. So I think mum was one of 5 daughters, and there was 2 brothers, and the brothers got the farm, and all on that beautiful river country. So, the girls marry, and that was the way of the generations back there. So my mum gave up a lot to come over to the West, and no family network or support over here. And, she did have a sister in Albany, but that was it. So pretty lonesome journey, and
Yes.
But look, Mum did a fantastic job supporting Dad and bringing up the kids and living out in the bush. And like I say, we had nothing for a long period of time there, and she made that work, and that was super important. So yeah, Mum passed away a few years ago, but no, she was brilliant, and I've got a lot of traits from my mum, and a few looks and something as well. So, but very kind and caring person that did an amazing job with us kids. And, we didn't go without, if you know what I mean, even though we had nothing. So.
Yeah. Oh, look, thanks for sharing that, Bill. Yeah, I mean, it's quite fascinating when you look at the upbringing you've had. Clearly you had a beautiful family surrounding you, and the community was pretty important and had a big role to play. I noticed that you took your schooling through Esperance, and then you went away to boarding school.
Yeah, look, I went to Mazenod College. It was sort of like when Dad took the business from Conning Up, when I was about 10 years old, he moved the business from Conning Up into Esperance.
Right.
Just out of town, opposite the Esperance golf course that I stole many a golf ball from. So anyone listening that missed a golf ball that went into the lakes, that was me hiding in the lakes, stealing all those balls and then reselling them. But no, when he took the business in, it really did flourish. But because I was the youngest out of my siblings, there was a 3 or 4 year gap between my sisters. They never got the opportunity what I did from a schooling basis. I got the opportunity to go to boarding school. I did my first 2 years of high school at Esperance High.
Yes.
And, fast forward, there's still, great mates of mine. I grew up with them, but I think there was only 4 people out of 130 or 150 that actually went to university that graduated in year 12 in Esperance High in my year group. So It was a sacrifice. My mum and my dad thought hard about that because Dad didn't appreciate education. And I was reasonably smart, not super smart, don't get me wrong, I didn't get the hugest TE score, but I was very good at maths and science, and, they probably a couple of key disciplines that I love and still rate, and, we need to do more in that in the schools, but that was always going to take me through an education path into a university type degree. And yeah, I was just very fortunate that my mum beat my dad in that argument, and he spat the chips, but he did ask me, to his credit, he goes like, it's up to you. And I said, no, I really want to go. And went to Mazenod College for 3 years. And, it's not the most academic school, very, very sporty school, but a really good balance of everything, community, educational and sport. I think, it gave me a really good bound. I didn't really enjoy the boarding school environment. Yeah. I enjoyed having a football team around there every night. That was great, or a cricket team or a basketball team.
Yes.
And I've still got great mates from boarding school, like, a couple in particular. One's my best mate still, and we went to uni together as well in School of Mines. But yeah, so that gave me a good grounding, mate, to be independent as well.
Yes.
Boarding school is pretty tough.
Yep.
And, like we did some shit that I still regret these days to certain pupils, and that was the era of bullying and all that sort of shit, which you don't see anymore, thank God. But, you get involved in some of that as peer group pressure and I copped it as well. But, geez, it made us independent and stand on our own 2 feet. And,
Sure.
And look, like I say, it was a really good balance for me. But I haven't even been back to the school since I left, which is, I don't know, I'm still trying to work that one out in my head why.
Yeah.
It wasn't the hugest experience, but I did like the people I was with, and I did get a good education that then led on to, I guess, where I went to next in university.
There's a couple of things that comes out of that, Bill, is that, first of all, working with your dad, you really got a handle on machinery, big machines.
Absolutely.
What constituted a big machine and what it took to drive one, what it took to be a part of one. Firstly, the second thing is you got yourself to a point where you had options through school.
Yeah.
And you could go to a university.
Yep.
The big question most kids have at that age is, well, how did you know what you wanted to do and where did you want to go? Because it's such a big, we've all got kids that are going through that right now. What am I going to do? How did you know?
Yeah, the old man just had a work ethic that I've never seen before. And look, I've got, I'm a workaholic. That's who I am. And I was working until 2:30 this morning on my own business. So, but yeah, Dad instilled that, but I saw it, I was immersed in it. But he was one of those people that, I had no option but to help him or assist him or be, work around. So from pretty much, early age, even probably 8, 9, I was out at Conaup, I was driving bloody gear around and I enjoyed that. As a young kid, you jump on a tractor or a harvester or whatever or a crane. But, when the business moved into town and expanded really, really quickly, I was not a full-time employee, but not too far off, working with Dad and on weekends and he'd give me the cashies, so that was great. So that was awesome. But then I travelled a lot with Dad. We had to go to a lot of auctions all around the farm clearance sales, as you know. And that's where Dad, got his business because he had to buy all that gear all around the state. And so I travelled the vast array of WA countryside, and hopefully no police listening, but I drove his ute all around the countryside and I was sitting on a pillow because I was actually quite short until about year 12, first year uni is when I actually had my growth spurt. But I used to have to sit on a pillow as a 10, 12-year-old, and I was driving his little HQ Kingswood ute all around the countryside while he was asleep there. Yeah, so look, I had that exposure around the yard. I used to shock a lot of people coming in. Trucks would come in with gear and tractors and stuff dropping off or tyres or whatever, and there I'd be in the crane and sitting on a pillow. I drove that crane all the time. I literally was the full-time crane driver for Conaup Wreckers, and people used to spin out when I'd get out and I'd be 4 foot high and 12 years old.
Just looking over the steering wheel.
Looking over the steering wheel. Like I say, the pillow come in handy, but never smashed anything or broke anything. But yeah, so I was around machinery a lot. And that was one of my appeals for mining was I love big kit and big machinery. So, and that mechanical aptitude has done me really well in my career, like especially early on working underground. I spent a long time, we'll probably come to it later on, but I spent a long time underground before I went into the office, and that mechanical aptitude of driving cranes and trucks and bloody loaders and, harvesters and tractors held me in massive stead for my next part of my journey and work career, and still to this day, I do pride myself. I can reverse trailers and trucks and all that. So, you don't get to do it much, but I am threatening the boys when we start our new underground mines. I'm taking the first cut and I'm bogging it out and I'm trucking it as well. So
that was a really integral part of getting you to the School of Mines. I mean, your next step out of Masnod was to go to the School of Mines. And what made you, was that the driver? As in you wanted to get into mining, but you didn't know which element of mining you wanted to get into? Or?
Oh, look, I did from an early age. Like I'd been around Dad, I literally was a full-time crane driver. I pretty much knew early on. Not many people. I ask my kids these days, what do you want to be? And they're like, Dad, we're not like you. And we'll work it out another 2 or 3 years. And I'm like, shit, you're going to be 22 by then or 20 or whatever. But early on, I just liked business. That was one thing I saw Dad. He was entrepreneurial. Couldn't read or write, but he was entrepreneurial and had that work ethic. And I just saw the fruits of that labour as he developed that business in town. And like the time I was sort of 14, 15, he was getting really successful. And you're at that age where you understand it. So I wanted to be in business, but I didn't want to be in his business. It wasn't appealing for me. And I was the only son, so, that was pretty disappointing for him and took him probably a while to get over that. But, I had aspirations to use, my maths and science and go into something. So I originally wanted to get into oil and gas.
Right.
Yeah, when I was a 12, 13, 14-year-old, I thought, that's great, I want to be in oil and gas. And thank God I didn't go down that path now because it's sort of a bit of a dirty word. But then, through that, I went to a careers expo when I was, I reckon, 13, and I wanted to be a crane driver. That's what I want to be. I want to be a crane driver. And you had to be 16 to get your tickets and all that, and get your certification, your riggers and all that. And so I was over at the crane divers stand. First careers expo they did in the basketball stadium at home. And I was talking to the riggers and the crane drivers and how to go about it. And I got hit in the bloody eye by one of those laser theodolite machines, surveyor instrument machines. And I went, what the hell's that? But I'll go and have a look at that. And went over and it was the School of Mines Careers Expo stand.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I just started talking and they were explaining and, stuff mining and surveying and all that. And I was like, this is really cool. And it's all maths and science. So yeah, from that point at 13, I wanted to be a mine surveyor, which, looking back, sorry to any surveyors out there, glad I didn't go that path. I actually ended up changing in the end in year 12. I changed my preference from mine surveying to mine engineering.
Right.
The rest is history from that. Predominantly mining engineers, manage mining companies or managing operations.
Yes.
And they're sort of top dogs, and I'm glad I went down that path. But yeah, definitely the School of Mines was an amazing sort of event, just sliding door moment.
Wow.
Sliding door moment.
And so let's go on to the School of Mines. It's a celebrated institution. Your alumni, when you talk about mining, is quite prestigious when you look in the lights of the guys that you hear have been through the School of Mines. Raleigh Finlayson, Ken Brinston, David Flanagan, Shane McClay, just to name a few. Tell me a little bit about what you saw within the School of Mines. What sets it apart? And talk about your journey through there.
Yeah, well, first of all, Rel is a mining surveyor. So he did all right, actually, so I shouldn't bag surveyors. But, he did fantastic in it. And, so we all know what Rel's achieving and going on to achieve. But, look, I think like any great institution, there's a history and a culture that's been, evolved and lived and breathed and nurtured and cared for over a number of journeys. And I think when I got to the School of Mines, it was probably 90 years old or whatever it was. And so that tradition and that culture was well ingrained and it brought through a lot of people in industry that you knew of or you're working for or whatever. And, there's a lot of industry legends and they retire and then there's new industry legends. And it's got a fantastic culture. And also, because it's based in Kalgoorlie, you had the element where you just knew everyone and you're in the community, you're immersed in it. You're literally eating, sleeping, shitting and partying with everyone in that university, to be quite frank. And you form lifelong relationships there and you can't escape. It's not like Perth where you go to Curtin Uni and you caught a bus or an Uber or whatever to get there or parked and you come from all different suburbs, like basically Kalgoorlie's one suburb.
Yes.
So you're playing sport with everyone. You go to the pub, same nightclub, same cafe, and obviously at uni you're all together. So just that interaction is just an amazing ecosystem that it was just fantastic to be involved in. And like I say, I've got lifelong friends that are still my lifelong friends from there. And there's a lot of unwritten rules about the institution. I'll take a call from any WASM graduate anywhere around the world, don't even know who they are. It's just a code of ethics we operate in. But it was just a great tradition. And, I wasn't the smartest person coming through, but, the lecturers were also in that fold as well. Like, I broke my ankle and had bloody 13 screws, 4 plates and 3 operations, dodging pre-season football on my motorbike. And, I spent 6 months off, but, the lecturers knew that I probably had a little bit of sparkle and a bit of go about me. And, I literally got passed on a few subjects I probably shouldn't have. But they knew it as well. They just knew who to look after and what to do and how to nurture people through. So it was just an amazing organisation, which obviously I'm extremely passionate about. And
yes.
It's the fabric of the mining industry when you really look at it.
Yes.
I think we've got 40% of industry's graduates nationwide on engineering and metallurgy and geology and surveying. So it's a powerhouse.
It sure is. Absolutely. And when you came out of there, Bill, you came out of there with an honours in engineering and mining.
Yeah, don't know how.
Well, that's pretty outstanding.
Yeah, don't quote the class of the honours, but I think I did shock. I literally did on the graduation. I shocked everyone that I had the because you can't miss it. You got the robe and you got the different stripe.
Yeah.
And look, I took 5 years to do a 4-year degree, by the way. Yeah, and look, there's reasons why. I didn't have the maths to get in, and I failed English in year 12. So I had to do bridging courses in my first year uni, and that pushed you back, and you can't do certain subjects. So that's my side of the story. But my last year, someone had to run the pub.
Right. Okay.
And I can't remember that year, but and I can't remember locking the joint up every now and again. But and with another colleague, Simon Jessup, who's another industry legend who's the COO of Northern Star at the moment and was one of Rel's key lieutenants. So Simon and I ran that pub for a year, and I don't think he can remember locking up sometimes either, just by the way.
Good times.
Yeah, look, it was. But it was, I was working 4 12-hour shifts a week that last year at Canowna Bell, which is quite funny because I ended up going on and buying that mine. But, so it's and I had to run the pub, I was playing rugby then. Yeah, it was a good last year. But when I rocked up to graduation with the, because I was 5 years, it was a year below. And that was one of the biggest years at graduated mining engineering. I think they were literally shocked that I got honours. Which, it's like anything in universities. I think we use 5% of that degree, but there's the unwritten stuff you can't put in a degree. It's like working with people, cheating on exams, all that sort of stuff, how to get away with it, how to store stuff in your calculator. But seriously, working with people and those team environments, we're always doing tutoring groups together. We're doing assignments together, and we all had our little groups.
Bonded.
Yeah, like I live with the same 4 guys. I live with Simon Jessup, Chris Bray, Shane McClay, and myself. Sorry, not Shane. Shane we did 1 year, but another guy, Scott Boyle. So we lived together 4 or 5 years, and Shane for a couple as well. So you just form those relationships, and at each house had the same sort of setup, and then we'd all go to that house and study and play around and have a bit of fun. But
as you say, it's produced a phenomenal network.
It's an amazing alumni that's come out of that. And, this is from, the Barry Pattersons, the Peter Bartletts of the world, and, all these people that have come through the system, and, the who's who of the mining industry that really built all that infrastructure, all those companies. Western Mining was stacked full of it. There was a breeding ground. And all the mining services companies, a lot of them come out of the stable of the School of Mines and alumni. So it's an amazing sort of story of, maybe one day they'll write a bit of a book about who's come out and then what they've done. But, it's extraordinary. And it's just an unbelievable network. And it just it gave you the building blocks to then go into the field. And that's something that we just got to keep nurturing that. Curtin are doing a fantastic job as custodians of that institution. And it's got the recognition it needs, because we did have a few bites there 10 or 15 years ago to try and keep it in Kalgoorlie. So, that's long past, and it's a great relationship there now. So, again, we just got to get more kids to get into study those disciplines, because mining now is coming sexy with these future-facing metals, and so we're going to need the youngest and brightest of the communities to come in and mine and help the world transition.
Bill, from there, I think it's a really good point to make that when you embarked on your career, and this is where we get into the guts of it now, in terms of you've come out of the School of Mines, and it seemed to be, to me, a deliberate pathway that you had in mind as to how you wanted to go about your career. And I'd be really interested to hear how this unfolds. But you came out and it seemed like you mapped it out. You had an understanding. You mentioned or alluded to earlier, you wanted to get on the tools earlier rather than go into a management or an office style environment. You started out on the tools. And so was that part of just a whole raft of decisions you thought you would have had to make to get to where you wanted to go?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I've always had a career pathway in mind. And I definitely get to forks in the road where you've got to make a decision to go one way or the other. And I always take counsel when I get into those situations. But it's fair to say I've mapped out my career along the way. There's always optimizations and stuff like that, or opportunities, but I don't do anything erratic. I stick to the game plan. And so I've always had a view of where I want to ultimately be. And I'm really only stepping into that role now, to be honest. As stupid as it sounds, I'm now doing what I've always wanted to do. And we'll come to that a bit later. But going back, I looked at, I'm a practical person. I'm not handy with my hands. I can't go and do a lathe and make a chair or something like that. But I can fix shit on a car and stuff like that. I know how to service it and change X, Y, Z. That's, brought up with that obviously from Dad's background. But I just looked at mining and thought, well, I'm a mining engineer. I'm ultimately going to end up being the general manager of a mine site. That was the goal. Underground manager and then general manager. That's your dream as a mining engineer going through. And then I look, well, what do I need to get into that position? I always look at that sort of stuff. What do I need to get to that end goal? What do I need to achieve, all the experience I need? And then how am I going to be perceived in that role? And I worked out pretty quickly I needed to know the operational side, so that I could, then when I got into management or get onto the technical side, I knew the practical side to be able to apply that technical aspects too, because mining it's operational, and operational people make or break you. And I don't think people realise this, but my old shop, I think we ended up with 5,500, 6,000 people when I left mid last year. Only 10% of that workforce was people from a technical discipline like an engineer, mining engineer, a metallurgist, a surveyor or a geologist. The other 90% are mechanics, fitters, auto sparkies, electricians, operators or blue-collar workers or process, operators. That's 90%. That's your heart and soul of your business is your what I call your blue-collar workforce, but they make or break you. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to be a manager, that's the workforce I'm going to need to manage. And they need to respect you. And how do they respect you? Well, you got to go there and do their job, be there, done it before, experienced it, understood it, work side by side.
Yes.
Because I'm always one of these people that I'm in this for the long game. And, I'd probably never retire, but I'm still in this for another 30, 40 years in what I'm doing. And I just thought, well, I need to be at that shop floor. I need to be working with these people because I want them all through my career as well. And so when I get into management, I want them to keep working for me, respect me and all that sort of stuff. So hence I wanted to get the right experience. And look, back when I was, doing your uni time, you worked every holidays. That's how you put yourself through uni.
Yes.
2 to 3 months, you blow the first week of uni and stay at the ABH, which we all did, and we'd, Sunday session, run amok for a week at the old Quinlivan's pub, and like the rest of the country do. Yeah, we was just skip that first year. The lecturers got over it after the first year. They didn't give a shit. In fact, they ended up taking the first week off uni because they thought these boys aren't coming back. But, those uni holidays, what I worked out is, and I went and worked for predominantly, in the end, the mining contractors, because back then Western Mining was really changing. It was a changing of the guard. Western Mining was the organisation which was the pinnacle. You wanted to go and work for them. They had that many operations, Campbell, Olympic Dam, everywhere. They were massive. And they would train well, and they created a lot of entrepreneurial spirit out there. But all those people then went out and created the Burncuts, the Barmincos, JR Engineerings, and all those organisations. It was a massive exodus of high-performing talent out of that business.
Right.
Massive. A few management changes at the top didn't help that. I won't go there. They lost that spirit, and the organisation really started to deteriorate early on. So us as mining engineers or geo, none of us wanted to work for Western Mining. As sad as it is, but all the great geos were all going out and doing other stuff as well, and they lost that high-performing talent. So we and all these people went into the mining contractors or the services industry. So we followed them, and we wanted to work in those organisations because they're entrepreneurial, they're energetic, and they trained you the right way. So I went and worked for Elton's, which was owned by Patterson and Bodica, Smithy and Harks. Then I ended up working for Barminco later on. But those organisations were amazing to get that DNA, and it was working with at the coalface. So I spent 4 years underground as a labourer.
Right.
And to get your tickets, like your shift boss's ticket and the underground manager's ticket, which is what you want. You want your first class ticket, to run a mine. You need that. That's a statutory position. You have to have basically a year's experience underground as a labourer and a year's experience associated with underground in technical planning and all sorts of stuff. Then there's another 5 years experience in mining and yada yada. But there's a really described discipline of what you need to do underground. But I did 4 years, and I deliberately did that. No one knew I was a mining engineer. That was one thing. I had that pack with Paddy Ryan was the ops manager with Elton's, and they had a wicked graduate program, which I've cut and paste Barminco, Northern Star, and I'll do it again in my new vehicle. It was a wicked graduation package, graduation experience. But Paddy ran the engineers, but no one knew I was a mining engineer. I did that deliberately. I didn't want any favours. I didn't want anyone looking at me, thinking, one day you're going to be my boss or whatever. And I wanted to earn my stripes. I didn't want to go from, nip ring to a truck or to charge up or to a bogger or to a jumbo. I wanted to earn it.
Yep.
And I did for 4 years. No one knew I was a mining engineer. It was only the sort of day I left when everyone's like, you're on the jumbo earning $1,000 a shift back then. This is 97, earning $1,000 a shift as a graduate is not too bad.
Phenomenal.
And people turn around going, well, what are you leaving the jumbo for? You've been on for 6 months. I said, mate, I didn't go to uni to sit on jumbo. I've got aspirations to go X, Y, Z. And they're like, what, you're a mining engineer? It's like, I was like, yeah. And they go, geez, you hit that well. It's one of those things where that grounding of that blue collar, they're all people still working for me now or I've worked with in the past or coming to join me. These are the underground operators still out in the field that, they're the blood, sweat and tears type people that, will walk over hot coals for you because you did the same for them back at the coalface, and then when you got into the management roles, you nurtured them.
Such established relationships.
Yeah, mining is all about relationships.
Yep. And so, you mentioned you went to Barminco. You were there for around 8 years. You ended up at about 24. You were overseeing 150 miners. So you clearly graduated through the ranks quite quickly.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I was with Elton's. You got to be 23. I think it's 23 to do shift bossing, because underground shift bossing is the pinnacle of that blue collar worker type stuff. And I did end up doing a year of underground shift bossing out of those 4 years. But I had to go to Northern Territory because I was 22. I couldn't do shift bossing in W. Even though I passed the exam, I had to wait physically to turn 23. So I went to the Northern Territory, which is a new mine operation now, the Granites, and I did shift bossing there for 6 months. Then when I come back, I was 23 and I could shift boss back in there. And Elton's, we got kicked out of Kambalda and I switched over to GBF and worked for them for a year and did a bit of shift bossing and site engineering. Then got picked up into Barminco. And I was just very fortunate because when I was with GBF, which is a great year, I met a mentor, still a me now, but an industry legend miner called Ken Miller, Mongrel Miller. And he's 77 now. I just talked to him the other day. I'm going to go see him in a couple of months in Queensland. Yeah, Ken was a legend back in Kambalda and had his own contracting business, small scale, and then eventually got out of that, sold out of that and worked for Roscoe with GBF down there. And he was my boss there for 6 months and saw a bit of talent in me and just said, got poached into Barminco by Peter Bartland at Wiluna. And rang me up like within 2 or 3 weeks and said, Bill, you got to come up here as my relief manager. And that was, 24 years of age and 150 miners up there in Wiluna. And that was a baptism of fire, to be honest. It was like,
I would have thought so. Yeah.
No one's born with management or leadership skills.
No.
So,
and I would have thought most of the miners you were managing were older than you.
every one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that answers that.
Maybe 2 truck drivers are a bit younger. And I've had to deal with that all through my career, to be honest. Yeah, it's changed now because I'm 47, but it was only a couple of years ago I still had to deal with that. So, but I've had that, that all the way through. But Ken was brilliant for me in Barminco. Really gave me that start and gave the credibility, like bringing in a young mining engineer that no one's heard of and running. That was a big operation, like say 150 people. Yeah, as relief manager, so we're on a sort of 9 and 5 roster, and so 5 days I'm left by myself, and you learn how to. There's a lot of things I literally stuffed up on and that sort of stuff, but you learn from that. And that was a real learning curve of how to talk to large-scale workforces and in particular blue-collar workers, how to make them respond and work for you. And it didn't take long, actually. And again, there was people in there that I'd worked with before, which at the coalface, lucky I did those 4 years because there was operators at Wiluna. They go, "Oh, how you going, Bill?" And and they could vouch for you. So, you get on, because, as soon as they leave the muster room and go underground, they're like, "Who's that young pup?" Blah, blah, blah. But to my defence, these guys come in pretty quickly, said, no, I've worked with Bill for a long time, for years, and he's got a bit of talent. He'll be right. Give him a break. Let him have a crack at this.
So, Bill, once you've been past this, almost say, whilst it's not an apprenticeship, it really is an apprenticeship to start and get you into where you ended up. At this stage, you could fairly well accurately call yourself an underground specialist at that point. And you decided, well, it's time to make the move and enter Northern Star. Yeah,
well, look, I spent 8.5 years with Barminco and by the end of that, I was running all their West Australian operations and had 1,000, 1,200 people under me in 12 mine sites, and a lot of those mines are still going today. So, like in the end, running those large-scale teams and equipment and contracts and clients, it's fair to say we saw the good, the bad and the ugly, and Barminco was a fantastic company to work for. Peter owned it, very entrepreneurial and cutting edge, and like us and Burncut were the 2 best underground mining contractors. So look, that gave me an unbelievable grounding. But again, I had the same sort of thing as and there was a step in between Northern Star. I did leave Barminco and go and set up my own contracting business.
Right.
So I did that with a couple of colleagues. We went up in Northern Territory. And again, it was one of those ones I was sort of, the entrepreneurial come out of me, because my dad said to me as a kid, he said, look, it took him a long time to start his business. Don't get me wrong, he was like 40 or something when he started it. But he said, if you can, never work for someone. Like, don't be a PAYG employee, Bill. He's like, I spent half his life doing that. And he goes, you've got to ultimately do that and work for yourself. That's where you should be. And literally, even though I'm a public listed company now, I'm like a massive shareholder in it, much, much, much bigger than Northern Star. And so I do feel like I'm working for myself again, which is super important. Otherwise, I wouldn't be there.
Yes.
But so look, I went and set up my own underground contracting business. That was a really good learning curve. It was massive. Like, we started off from scratch. We had nothing, no systems. We had no money. I sold a house to fund it. we managed to scrounge, our Westpac Bank. I don't know how they did it. Gave us a line of credit, and we had a client that wanted us. Really pulled us out of the old organisation of Barminco to set us up and gave us a kickstart. Everyone needs a kickstart in life.
Yes,
and they definitely gave us a kickstart. Look, it was one of those ones, made the first mill at 33 and lost it at 34. But and that was an amazing journey. Like they had open pit and underground operations, and look, the open pit operations pretty much sent them broke, and a couple of bad management decisions on their behalf. But look, they owed us a lot of money, but that was to our credit, we paid everyone back, all employees' entitlements, every supplier. We paid back anyone associated with that business. We paid back. Even the people that supplied us some equipment that we had to refurb and get it back to condition. It took me about 18 months, 2 years to pay that final payment back. Because we owed the ATO money, everything, like we walked away with our shirts on our back. But most importantly is we paid everyone out. And that person I took 2 years to pay out, he's my partner's uncle. So thank God I did that. Family barbecues would be a bit awkward, but a small world type shit. But yeah, look, that was just, and you fast forward from that example and, you get a lot smarter and wiser in business by, losing everything basically and having to start from scratch. And that was a great example. So we did that for about 18 months, 2 years. And it was a fantastic business, but when you don't get paid at the end of the day, it's not.
No.
So it gave me a really good grounding on business, what to do and what not to do. And I'm proud of what we did with all those people and paying everyone out, because not many people do that. We could have taken an easy option, to be honest.
Yep.
And we probably would have walked away with a couple of $1 million each, but we didn't do that. And it's not thank God, but that's just our DNA is. It hurt, but, fast forward years later, people go, yeah, well, I'm going to come work for you, Bill, because you did the right thing.
Yep.
And, so look, even stepping out of Barminco, people were like, why are you doing that? You're on, your 3IC. They want you to, like the succession plan ultimately was, me to be MD of that business in due course. And I just said to people, I want to do stuff myself. But I came back to, I didn't do mining engineering to be a mining contractor. That was not the goal. Ultimately, mining engineers end up in the mine ownership side of things. And I said, I've done it, this journey, because again, I wanted all that skill set for when I did get into mine ownership, because you quite often see mine owners that literally stuff up their operations because they don't know how to mine.
Yes.
And I just never wanted to be one of those mine owners eventually that didn't have that DNA. So, that was half my career was mining contracting, and talk about it later, but I'm getting back into it. It's part of my business model, and I love it, and I'm super passionate about it. But you look at mining engineers that go through that mining contracting system and then go into upper echelons of management, they are very successful. And like Stu Tonkin's one of those guys. Luke Cray is the ex-COO of Northern Star, the current COO of Northern Star. Simon Jessup had a big grounding in Burncut. You can go across industry, and guys like Shane McClay's got a consultant business now, but had a good grounding in contracting. So those people that have come through those disciplines, they really do go on and be very, very solid mine owners. And I want to be one of those people.
Once that mining services business had been wound up and sorted, that was when Northern Star came online.
Yes, that was difficult times.
The opportunity came up. How did you find the company?
It found me. Basically, when our client was going broke, we weren't getting paid. Obviously, we owed a lot of money, and I had two kids, one coming out. So, it was difficult times, really, really difficult times, and quite challenging. I don't like talking about it too much, but look, they were, you didn't know where the next meal was going to come from, and, not being drastic about it, but it was pretty difficult. Like when
that was reality.
Yeah, it was reality. So, I had to, do consultancy work, and, look, when you come out of, 3IC of a large organisation, running a heap of people and getting paid a fortune, to drop back, 10 levels in your career type thing. Not saying about that consultants, but like it was, that was hard. And there was some people that gave me work that, I'll never forget.
Yeah. Some people really stood in your corner. Yeah.
And they didn't have to. So, it's just, you look back and you go, shit. And, I've replicated that favour a number of times with different people in industry that have had those tough journeys.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, good on you, Bill. Thanks for sharing it. I mean, these sorts of things, if they don't break you, they make you stronger, clearly. Yeah. And in this case, Northern Star found you in that respect.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And, I had a headhunter that guy, Rolly Pennock, who's sort of still around, probably a little bit semi-retired now, but I bump into him every now and again down Cot. Yeah, he was sort of one-man band, and he kept close to industry, and and could spot talent, which is one of the main things from a good recruiter. And he headhunted me earlier on, actually for a job in Western Areas, which is a job that Dan Locker ended up getting and then going on to be CEO and MD, and also just getting taken out by IGO at the moment. So, Dan, if you're listening, you stole my job. But look, he had, but it wasn't the right time. And this was back in Barminco before I left, I just employed at that stage about 20 senior management people into Barminco, and they're all on north of 200 grand packages. And Stu Tonkin was one, Luke Cray as well, and then multiple others. And it was one of those ones I literally just employed them. And the last thing you can do as a manager is you employ key people that you've worked with in the past, you want in there, and all of a sudden you say, see you later, I'm out of here.
Can't do it.
They'll never ever work for you again. So I was forced to hang around. And I did. I gave up an opportunity. I'm not saying I would have got it. I got down to the final two, but I pulled out at the last minute. I just said, look, I can't do it.
Yep.
Otherwise, I just don't feel right.
Yep.
And, these people have come on board to work for the organisation and work with me in that opportunity. And I just don't feel right. Can't do it. So I pulled out. A couple of years later, Rolly remembered that and had an opportunity in Northern Star. It was just a greenfields exploration company up in the Kimberleys, and they're looking for an MD. And normally the MDs of exploration companies are geologists, not mining engineers. But he sort of convinced the board to put me on the list and rang me up and just got me at a weak moment in Northern Territory. I was sitting down the front of a car yard and, literally going, far out, I'm stuffed, this is...
What's my next move?
Yeah, what's my next move? I just said, look, I'm interested. Give me an opportunity to do some research, and I always do research on stuff. And I had a look at the company, and there was a couple of appealing things, like the 25% shareholder was Jubilee Mines with Kerry Marnus, and he was flying back then with Cosmos, big company making heaps of money, and he was a big shareholder, and they were a big shareholder of us. So I knew one thing: I was going to get paid, which is very important, and that was pretty important back then.
Particularly at point, yeah.
But I did want to get into mine ownership side of things. So I did have aspirations to go into the corporate arena. And I hadn't been in the corporate arena per se, because I'd just been, working for private companies at a very high, executive level, but I hadn't been in a public listed vehicle and in the corporate arena and also mine ownership. So I just thought, well, I'll have a look at it, throw my hat in the ring. I did like the projects at the stage, and I thought, well, I can have an influence on the strategy and all that. And so I joined it. I think they were 10 cents a share then. I think they dropped down to 7 when they announced I was joining. But so that was August 2007 when I joined Northern Star.
Gosh.
And as you know, the GFC come around pretty quick.
Well, it was literally around the corner. Yeah.
Yeah, that was again, sort of you get kicked when you get kicked. And but look, I've always had a keen interest and a hobby on capital markets and economics and stuff like that. I read a lot of stuff when I can.
Yes.
And I do keep in tune with what's happening financially around the world. And I could see that train crash coming, to be honest. And even my own self, I sold all my shares. And at the peak of the ASX back then, I was thinking it was 6,800. And no, I didn't have much then, but I just didn't like it. There was a few catalysts that I thought I could see a train crash. And I actually pulled up all our drill programs. I put a team together, raised some money, we were drilling, and I literally cancelled everything halfway through. And thank God I did, otherwise we would have folded because we only had so much money. But we closed it all out, and geez, we had to beg, borrow, and steal to keep the company afloat. There's no two ways about that. It's a bit of folklore, but the only asset we had when we closed the doors was a little exploration. It was called a complex, but it was just a tin shed and a transportable up at Halls Creek, and I managed to sell it for 330 grand on vendor payment terms. It took about 18 months, 2 years to pay.
Gosh.
But no real estate agent would go out and touch it, so I literally just put a sign on the IGA bloody notice board that it was for sale, and someone driving past in the region saw it and rang me up, thank God. But we took directors' loans. We weren't getting paid, and I think I was on half pay or no pay, and we're just accruing debts, and all your entitlements were accrued, and it was they were tough times. Any director didn't want to look each other in the eye, because you probably would have had to call someone in to sort of wrap it up.
Yep.
And to the credit of my past chairman Chris Rowe and directors like Peter Langworthy and others, like they put their hand in their pocket and lent some money, and they were difficult times, and I was consultancy as well part-time because I just couldn't put food on the table. So
yes,
they were amazing times. They're good characters, but there was a journey at 27 to 210 in Northern Star where it went through a lot, even though we didn't achieve a lot. But I really had what I call an apprenticeship as an MD.
Yes.
I literally got a 3-year, 4-year, 3-year apprenticeship corporately.
Yep.
When you have to hold tenements when you got no money, and there's tricks to that. That's why the Mark Creasy's are one of the richest guys in the state, because he had half the state pegged and still does. And he's been able to hold those tenants for a long period of time. So you learn all those tricks off those guys. The Stan McDonald's, who was a big shareholder of Northern Star back then, and had the other half of the state pegged and was Duralia, and got bought out by Atlas Iron. But those guys, you learn off them and beg, borrow, steal, and maintain. So actually, I had lunch with Stan when we were really tipping on the edge, and Stan never pays for lunch.
Right.
And I'm like, fuck, how am I going to pay for this lunch? I've got no money. The company's got no money. Shit. I hope the credit card doesn't bounce. But I just remember at the end of the lunch, he just goes, Bill, I know where you're at. I know what you're in. But he goes, just try and keep the company afloat. Just try and salvage something for shareholders.
Yep.
And that comment's never lost me. And it just also you reflect on those comments later on, is when you run a publicity company, it's about shareholders.
Yep.
And that's a sort of a little snippet of something that's ingrained in me of what Stan said, is just salvage something, keep something for shareholders, keep it afloat.
Yep.
That wasn't easy, but we did.
And you maintained it. So, Billy, it was a fast track from then in terms of the way you handled Northern Star and the acquisitions that followed. Was that a purposeful intent? You really wanted to leverage off your skill set, identify mines that you already knew to a large degree, and then expand them and do it the right way, or what you saw was the right way. Operational, production, keep the costs low, and make as much as you can.
Yeah. Look, it was, like the closing out the exploration phase of Northern Star, I had to find a new investor, and Mike Fody's come along and recap the company with us. But I'll never forget a conversation I had with Peter Langworthy in the car park. He goes, look, I like what Mike's trying to achieve and what he wants to do, and he said you should hang around the hoop. You should actually explore this opportunity, because Mike wanted to put assets into the company, but he didn't want to manage it. He wanted management to come with it, and that was great. But I said to Mike up front, I said, look, I'm a mining engineer, mate. I'm not a geo like you. I said, no offence, but I said geos spend money. Mining engineers don't have a job unless they make money. And I said, unless you want to back the vision that I want to go and own and operate assets that I think can demonstrate near-term cash flow within 24 months. I didn't realise we were going to get cash flow from day one on the first acquisition, but that was the vision. I thought that I wanted to be using my skill set as an operational mining engineer to go and buy and own, operate mines. And to Mike's credit, he fully endorsed that and backed it, and we recapped it at 1.25 cents, Northern Star, and it's trading it, got to $17.50 12 months ago. Amazing result, but we did get to 1 cent, and I'll never forget my ex-wife. She did remind me, I was, back then, you're the MD of a 1 cent mining company, and I still laugh at that. So you got to keep your feet on the ground and reflect on that. But look, fast forward in 2010 July, we, I do seize opportunities, mate. You got to put yourself in the game.
Yes.
I hate these people that sit on the edge of the court or on the sideline of the field and just say X, Y, Z, but step over the line and get in the game. Otherwise, quiet.
Yep.
Be quiet. And I was only talking to a friend about this yesterday. It's you've got to put yourself in the zone, and that's just life as well. You won't meet your partner unless you go and say hello, will you?
No.
Or you won't meet people unless you go and say hello. And it's no different in business and work. I've got umpteen examples of where I've walked corridors, or in Barminco when I was a junior burger and went into doing tendering in the office, I'd 3 or 4 times a day I'd walk past Peter Bartlett's office just so he knew who I was, and just say, wave and say hello, and just do those deliberate things where people know and can see you and you're engaged and whatever, and opportunities happen from putting yourself in the game. So it's no different at Northern Star as we had nothing in 2010. I think I had 50 grand in the bank when I put the offer in on Paulson's in July 2000 or in March 2010, and just I saw an opportunity, and there's a colleague of mine, Mike Moroney, who's still in Northern Star now. I worked for him. Then I got him to come in the business years later, but he was an investment banker back at that stage, and he just rang me up and said, Bill, I know you're looking for an asset to buy, and I know you want to go and own and operate an asset. He goes, there could be an opportunity here, and it wasn't for sale. I just literally got the number off him, cold called the MD and said, would you entertain an offer? And he said, yeah. And so, we did due diligence, and we bought that asset. The time we settled, we had 5 grand in the bank, and I didn't know where the payroll was coming from in 2 weeks' time. But, bought a cracking asset, saw the potential, like everyone involved in it. It's not just me. It was a full team effort. Mike Photius has got a geological gift. I say a gift. Yes, XYZ commercially, but as a geologist, he's the best I've ever seen in my whole career. Doesn't matter what commodity you talk to, and he gave us the confidence to buy that asset on literally 2 drill holes, and only one of them had an ore grade intercept below the current sort of mine plan. And when we bought it, we paid more for it than what the mine plan actually said. So it was an amazing result. So yeah, look, and the business model to do that, Banners, hasn't changed. Like that acquisition model and operational plan that I published when I announced the deal in 2010 before we even settled. That's the same thing I published every acquisition I did for the next 11 or 12 acquisitions.
So on those acquisitions, 2010 Paulson's, then you've got Plutonic.
Yep.
Then you've got 2 mines off Barrick.
Yep.
And then you've got Jundee.
Yep. Fantastic asset.
And you bought that off Newmont for 82.
82 and a half.
82 and a half.
Probably makes that a quarter now.
Which is unbelievable.
Yep.
And at that stage, Northern Star's now become the second biggest gold miner behind Newmont. So that was a pretty fast, when you talk about acquisitions, that was a fast track. You were on. You knew what you were doing, your model, and clearly Mike Photius had a role to play in that. But now you knew what you were doing and you were cash positive and things were starting to move for you.
Yeah, look, it was. And I'm one of these people that you got to have a strategy behind your business.
Yeah.
If you don't have a strategy, and if you don't have even your own personal life with your own career and stuff, like I've always had stuff mapped out.
Yep.
I'm always thinking about where I'm going to go and what the timeline is and what I need. Probably people look at you've achieved a lot really quickly, but it's not. There's no overnight success story. Like it took me 20 years of experience to get into Northern Star and what I did, if you know what I mean.
Yes,
so
yes.
You can't. It's not. It's like Kerry Manis I love. Everyone thinks it's an overnight success, but it took him 20 years to get Jubilee to where it was. And, so there's a lot of blood, sweat and tears. People forget that. But look, coming back to Northern Star was, we had an operating model, but we always sat down in that business. Any major change in the business, we sat the whole executive senior management group and the board down and worked out what the strategy was, how to readjust the strategy. Or once a year we'd sit down and revise the strategy and see how we're tracking as a group. And I think I used to do 3-year strategies, and I think we did six 3-year strategies, but we achieved them all in 18 months. I think the last one we did in 20 months. So I'm always about setting a strategy where the business is going to be in 3 or 5 years' time.
Yes. And
admittedly, early on the genesis of the company, the mines didn't have big, long life, and we were aggressive. We were growing quickly. We didn't have the runway to set a 5-year strategy until the last couple of years before I left. We set a 5-year strategy. We achieved it in 2. And that's why I left. There was no point me setting the next 5-year strategy because I wasn't going to be there, and there's no point. Now they've set a new 5-year strategy and they're tracking along to that. But going back, I'm a huge believer of these workshops, getting everyone to buy in that, everyone input and doing that. And I used to think that was bullshit. 15 years ago, I thought that was a big company bullshit, but it's so powerful setting them up and doing it. So, we had a strategy to build the business and we went through that. You do have to upskill workforces and talent. And I'm a huge promoter of internal. I very rarely inject talent in. It's only if I need to at the last resort.
So organic.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan, and we were, Northern Star was one of the biggest trainers of apprentices, graduates, operators in the industry by far. I've always been like that. It was the same in Barming Co. Your best employees are the ones you've already got that you train. But there's times where you have to inject it. I remember losing the Yilgarn South assets. They were the first assets Barrick put on the chopping board back in 2013, and we come second, and I still think we had a better deal, and history says we did have a better deal, but they chose the security of Goldfields to sell those assets. And I had a certain management team around then that just didn't give me that extra push, that last 10 minutes of, fourth quarter where you need your captain just to, or your teammates just to pick you up and step up.
Yep.
I just didn't have that. I cried in my lunchbox a bit when I lost them, and because they were cracking assets and they still are. That made me to get more hungrier, and I upgraded my management team. That's when I brought in the likes of Stu Tonkin and others into the business. And
who could clearly execute.
And get that bandwidth and that grunt behind you. And but the industry crapped itself. It was like Chicken Little when we bought these mines, because late 13 through 14, we were buying a mine a month. And we went from 200 employees to 2,000 in 6 months. And everyone in industry was like, Chicken Little, Sky, Bill's taken on too much. Yeah, but what they forgot is they didn't know your background. Like corporately, I'd only been out in that arena for a couple of years. But they forgot that we ran large-scale teams in Barminco's and other organisations. So as we grew, we just went back to the well.
Yep.
And just pulled people that we've had through our whole career that we built our careers on. It was really simple. And you look back now and laugh about it, but at the time there was a lot of knives getting thrown around by external people, and people think we're all going to fail, and and we just kept kicking goal after goal. And but when you're buying a mine a month, people just thought the negative stuff. And it was also, how do you engage the new teams? Like all those teams, the same teams, when we bought those assets, the only head we chopped off was the GM. Everyone else we kept. Like I've never taken GM on acquisition. I just think it's unprofessional to take the top person when you want to enact change and get them to walk a different way, a different direction and wear a different shirt. But everyone else was the same. And we did amazing things with those assets. But we knew how to motivate people and engage in people. And quite a lot of these assets, because they're in big companies, the CEO, let alone the COO, hadn't been to site for 3 years. Because we're operational people, like you just couldn't keep us off site. So, and people work for people. And when you get underground or you get in the mill or get out the back of the tailings dam and you actually talk to the operators, they respect that.
Yeah,
and people switch really quickly. And that's what we did. Boots on ground, talk to workforces and being open and honest.
Yep.
Quite often, the hardest thing to say no is no. But people appreciate it when you actually just make a decision, and they might not like it, but if you make a decision and explain why, people move on pretty quickly.
Well, that's the end of part A, and you can't help but be absorbed by Bill's story. And there is plenty to go with this journey. Part B is up next.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Finding the Front, brought to you by the proudly West Australian wealth management and diversified financial services company, Euroz Hartleys. If you like what you heard, please don't hesitate to tell your friends and subscribe to the podcast through your podcast host of choice. If you have any questions or would like to contact us, please email our fabulous producer Bridget on communications@eurozhartleys.com or visit our website at www.eurozhartleys.com. This podcast has been general information only. Euroz Hartleys holds Australian Financial Services Licence 230052.